assimilate. Many Native Americans, especially those of mixed ancestry, like Eli, chose to become white and avoid much of the racism directed at indigenous people. As a young student, I learned that the people of the United States threw themselves into the great melting pot in order to transform a diverse society into one coherent nation. I learned later that what that really meant is that white people threw other races into the pot in an effort to eliminate diversity of culture, thought, and identity. In recent years, however, we have learned to embrace difference and to celebrate diversity. However, for many indigenous people like Eli, it was too late. For over a century, the story of Eli Davis, the Muskogee Creek citizen, was hidden by the racism within his own familial circle. His family did not know the truth about their own identity because Eli felt the need to hide from his. Too often, the stories of Native North America have been rendered invisible by a dominant culture that believed racial invisibility was akin to progress. Acculturation and assimilation were supposed to move the nation forward because indigenous societies somehow stood in the way of that progress. The popular claim that racism will disappear only when we no longer see race in our culture keeps us tied too closely to the old melting pot. Instead, it is time for us to see race in everything we do, to embrace it, to celebrate its presence among us, and to not ignore it. Only then can a little boy sit at his grandfather's knee and celebrate a shared heritage rather than negate it. The same can be said about Native American history. The United States was at its most diverse before the arrival of European intruders who quickly went to work transforming the continent into a European colony. The tenets of this settler colonialist agenda sought to reshape the continent into an extension of Western civilization. This meant the indigenous people of North America either had to avoid this new society or join it and become civilized. Eventually, the European population became so large that the native peoples had nowhere else to migrate. The only option was to assimilate. As native nations like the Cherokees adapted, they surrendered much of their culture and identity to the waters of the melting pot. What emerged were indigenous societies relegated to mere support roles of U.S. history. Moreover, the histories and identities of these indigenous societies disappeared over time as civilization taught us to forget them, much as it taught Eli to forget his. Soon, historians began to reintroduce diversity into our scholarship by including the Native American perspective in our narratives. The Cherokee Nation provides a bounty of those sources. However, simply including indigenous sources adds a new dimension to our story, but it does not fundamentally change it, and it certainly does not undo centuries of acculturation. In 2015, historian Brian DeLay suggested we change that by placing Native Americans at the center of our narratives of U.S. history, rather than on the margins. Centering indigenous voices helps to reverse the effects of the melting pot and reintroduces the stories of our indigenous past. Eli claimed to be white, but his mother did not, nor did her mother, nor her mother. As a little boy, I did not get to hear these stories of those indigenous ancestors from my grandfather because Eli refused to tell them. However, if we as historians follow Professor DeLay's advice, as I have done here, perhaps the little boys and girls of the Cherokee Nation and other tribes can one day hear those stories from the voices of their own ancestors and can help rebuild the diversity that existed on our continent prior to the melting pot. So many deserve my gratitude for this project. I am indebted to my reviewers for their timely and valuable feedback, and to copy editor Helen Robertson for her expert eye. Any errors in this book are most certainly my fault, not theirs. I would be remiss if I did not thank Linda Cameron and David Thorpe for hosting us in their basement for a summer of research. They've become sweet friends. Thank you to Heather, Veronica, Carla, and Scott, and the rest of the team at Stephen F. Austin Middle School for supporting me while I completed my degree. Without a doubt, you are the hardest working group of people I have ever met. Special thanks go to Walter Camphefner, Al Broussard, Lorian Foote, Kate Unterman, Alston Toms, Tom Waggy, Mike Perry, and Doris Davis for molding me into an historian and writer. Your fingerprints are all over this work. Finally, the Lord has placed 3 people in my life who make all of the work worthwhile. Leela Plummer insists that we are related. Her willingness to claim me as family makes me smile. Perhaps more than any other, she has taught me that racial identity is foundational to who we are as a people. Therefore, we must understand it. Finally, I am blessed to be loved by 2 of the most brilliant, independent, and capable people I will ever know. Katie Allgood is the model of love and grace. She has put up with me her entire life, yet, somehow, hangs around. I include her name here because of how important she is to me.